You're listening to Permission to Shine, the podcast. Stories of overcoming obstacles and finding self-empowerment with Sherisse Bisram, Inner Power Activation Leader. The Oxford Dictionary describes permission as the action of officially allowing someone to do a particular thing, consent, authorization. What if you were that someone and you gave yourself the permission to be everything you wanted to be and more? No more playing small and accepting less than. You are worthy of the life of your dreams, regardless of what it is that you've been through. And honestly, it's exactly what you've been through that has shaped you into the version of yourself that you are now. Like a diamond, you've endured so much, but instead of breaking, you have become stronger and brighter. And if that's not a reason to shine, then I don't know what is. And if nature can do it, then why the hell can't you? You are brave, you are strong, you are powerful, and you are enough. Hear my call and give yourself the permission to shine, because you don't realise how many people are inspired by your light. Hi everyone, this is episode 30. I can't believe I've done 30 episodes, mental. But I'm so excited to introduce to you today Nicole. Now, I found her on social media and she's always been posting really intriguing things, and it was just one post that got me, and I was like, I need to speak to this woman. I need her on my podcast. So hello, Nicole. Welcome all the way from New York.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here this morning. Thank you so much for asking me to be on the podcast. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, no, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And also, could you just tell us, your title and what it is that you do?
Sure. So I have a brand that I started called Wall Street Girl Next Door, which is the page that you found on Instagram. And I recently just started my own podcast that is part of the brand called the Money Diaries. And so I started Wall Street Girl Next Door last year, almost a year ago, to empower people to have a healthy relationship with their money. So a little background is I work in finance. I work at a bank. I've always worked in wealth management, and I help people who already have money and what to do with it and how to help them grow and reach their goals. But then I realized, like, we completely missed the mark on trying to help people have a healthy relationship with their money, which is exactly what my brand is all about. I want people to have a healthy relationship with their money. So the tone is to help break down fear and shame that we have around money, because we never talk about that part of money at
Absolutely.
all.
No, I love that. Thank you so much. And I think, like you said, it's so important, especially because I think, even within my field of, manifestation and things like that as well, sometimes our
Yeah.
body can't hold that money. So, a lot of people
Yep.
will bring it into their lives and then not know what to do with it, and or not think they're worthy enough of receiving
Yep.
that. So it's all of that tied
Exactly.
in. No, thank you. That's so exciting, and I can't wait to pull this all apart. So please start by telling us about your story and kind of how you fell into this, from the start. I'll give you the floor.
Sure. Yeah, so I did a stock picking challenge when I was in the 6th grade, where we just had to pick a handful of stocks and track them for a month. And I just became in love with the whole process. And that's when I knew I wanted to go ahead and be in finance. And I went to college and did economics, and I just knew I always wanted to help people. I've known that my calling is always to help people, and I always wanted to help people with their finances. And so I started working in the financial industry over a decade ago, and as soon as I got into the industry, I was helping people with financial planning, personal financial planning. I immediately saw that we don't promote financial literacy as much as we need to. And I saw that the whole financial industry is geared towards people who already have money, and a lot of money, not just a little bit of money, but people who have financial advisors and get that advice and that support have already reached a certain high economic level. So what happens to everyone else? And that, as soon as I got into the industry 10 years ago, I just said, I have to somehow reach these people. Like, these are the people that I want to help. And I would just sit there and think about, like, how am I going to do this? Like, how, and posting on social media for financial literacy wasn't a thing back then. And so I had this dream, and then I moved to New York 7 years ago to pursue my career and to take my career to the next step. And it was on my heart that it was like, okay, I'm going to move to New York for my career, but I somehow, if I can do financial literacy in New York City where everyone lives outside their means and lives these big lifestyles, I said, then I can really, this is just, I can just reach other people from there. And so when I moved here, I started doing some work at a nonprofit helping inner city high school kids with financial literacy. And so I would kind of dabble here and there in the financial literacy space and helping entrepreneurs with getting their businesses and their finances in order. But it's still, I still was like, we just are missing the emotional and the mental aspect of how do people, like, the thing is, and this is the most like mind-blowing thing that most people don't believe, if you make more money, it doesn't take away your fear and it doesn't take away your shame. You don't all of a sudden, have $1 million in your bank account and then you're like, "Oh, I feel great about this and I have a healthy relationship with my money." So I think the financial industry completely misses how to teach people how to, like you said, like to feel good with their money, to have that healthy relationship where they're not living in fear and shame. And we don't even talk about money because money is this taboo thing that as a society we don't even talk about. If people start talking about money, people get like, "Oh my gosh," like it's very triggering and uncomfortable. And that I think builds to the shame aspect, because we don't talk about like if you're struggling, with debt or anything, who do you go to for that? We don't open up the conversation to that. And that's part of the reason that I started the brand is I want to break down that barrier and start having those open conversations and really dig into how are people feeling about their money so that people know that they're not alone in it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for that work as well, because I think it's so needed. And actually, that conversation we had was before the call, and that was why I was going to cut in here just to say to people that I kind of said that I see a lot in this industry of like coaching and mentoring that people can make large and large amounts of money and not know how to keep it because they're
Yeah,
not in that alignment. So that's kind of the reference there. But it is so it's so that, and could you please explain for anyone that didn't know what it was, what financial literacy means? Because I think that
sure.
would be a great thing for anyone that's confused. If anyone's confused, they might not be, but I just
Yeah. Absolutely. So financial literacy, when I refer to that, it's educating people on how to have a healthy relationship with their money and to also know more about how their money works. And
Mm,
so I know that there's this stigma around, finances and people start saying these terms and then people kind of shut down and they're like, I don't understand what this is, it's just not meant for me. So financial literacy is making things approachable, making finances and things involving your money approachable so that you can understand your relationship and how it all works together.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And you're so right as well about the shame around money, like how we don't talk about it. And I think what I found coming into the entrepreneur space is that the circles I'm now in, everyone's quite comfortable to talk about money. But outside of that world, that, people have created, especially, female entrepreneurs that I'm in that space. But outside of that, in the normal everyday life, people don't talk about it. And actually, a group of my best friends now, we are having these conversations more openly because we're all comfortable with each other. But there would have been a time where we wasn't. And I think in the UK especially, and I know that obviously the US are probably going for it too, is like there's almost like a bit of a financial crisis at the moment, especially for us with Brexit and like everything that happened, like, with Ukraine and everything like that. We're all kind of getting the knock-on effect, mortgages and all the rates have gone up. So I think there's a lot of fear around it as well, as we were saying. So it is, yeah, it's so spot on that we need to understand what we can control in this situation, because I think there's a lot of power that we have within this that we're not aware of, and we'll definitely dive into that a bit further. But I just wanted to ask, kind of before we go forward, um, what was your relationship like with money growing up? Did you have like a stable ground? Was it something you had to build on? What was your relationship with money?
So I learned to my parents were savers and so they always were on the, you work hard, you save your money. which then turned into fear of spending money. So even though they would be really good with saving money and financially secure, they would have so much fear that even today, they have so much fear that they're afraid to spend their money. And so I wasn't even aware that I then carried that fear with myself. And so I did grow up with the foundation of, saving is important. And so I always had that. But then I've 100%, I have had a lot of struggles with money. I have gotten myself into debt and and debt's one of those things that I'm actually going to be doing a podcast episode on soon, probably a couple, because I feel like it's a really loaded topic with lots of different angles. And I mean, talk about like that's where a lot of people hold shame. But, back in my younger days, I was using debt to buy things that were very fleeting, that I didn't need, that weren't even necessarily for me. It was, to impress other people or to keep up with other people. And then I got myself into a lot of financial trouble and put myself behind. And then I'd have to dig myself out of the hole. And I learned from that. And like, that's okay, because I know how it feels to have that. And then I've also not had debt and been very responsible with my money and done save, and been saving with my money. And so and been able to save for trips and see that when I put my money in the direction that I want it to be going, how much differently it feels, then that's really where you see the shift with your relationship with your money, is when you start seeing, oh, if I do these things and my money's going to where I want it to be going, then it starts, you just need some momentum. And so, and I was actually just talking with my therapist last night, about there are some things right now that I'm investing in myself very heavily, in my support system with mentors and coaches. And it's just, this year has just been a huge investment in myself, and I've had to put some of that on credit card. But that's okay with me because I see it as an investment instead of, this is bad, I shouldn't be doing it. It's like, no, this is going to help me get to where I want to go. And so it's also breaking down, people thinking that we can't, use debt. And so it's just, that's just
Yeah.
part of the mental aspect of it too. But so that's a little bit of my
Yeah,
money
no,
story.
thank you for sharing that. And I think it's really important for people to understand where you stand
Mhm.
with money as well, knowing that you've been on both sides. So I think that's so important, isn't it? That that's the integrity piece. This is why you're doing the work you're doing, because you understand it from all points of view. And I think I agree with you on that part of this year, because for me, I invested in my mentorship this year, big investment, and that was like all of my savings that I put into that.
Yeah.
And I then spent all of that money, and I had this weird energy exchange in my body that was not prepared. So I think mentally I'd prepared myself to give over that money, knowing that it was the investment in myself, but energetically I wasn't prepared for how that would feel. And it almost
Yeah.
felt like poverty. Like I felt like this feeling of poverty. And I think for me, what I realized, and I don't know if anyone listening would probably resonate with, but almost that money, saving that money, because I came from a low income household, money was hard to come by. We all worked really hard. I worked 3 jobs my whole life. So saving that money was a long process. I say a long process, probably in the last few years I saved up that money, because I was planning to move to America, and that was going to be my little savings part and all of these things. And then when I couldn't move, I was thinking, okay, do I buy something in the UK? But again, as a self-employed dancer at the time, it was going to be hard to buy. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to take this business seriously now, and I'm going to do this. So I was all mentally prepared for it. And then when I gave that money over, and I did it in installments, so I could kind of still manage my life, it was really interesting for me to see how I'd kind of sifted into a lack mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
I was then trying to claw back that money in other ways. And it was just really toxic. So it was almost like it took me to the end of the time where I'd finished the mentorship, that I had to look at it in a completely different lens. Like you just said, it's an investment, and it's understanding that, money has a place for us in different ways. And
Right.
my friend calls it a vehicle. So she's like, money's the
Yes.
vehicle. So it needs to get you to where you need to be. So you can't
Yep.
always see, you don't always know the direction. You just trust that the vehicle is going to get you from A to B. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at money, because I think I'd worked so hard to get to that point where I'd had it, that almost giving it away felt like I was giving like a part of my authority away almost. And then that was probably the last layer of this toxic energy that I feel like I'd held for a long time, the survival. And it was almost like going back into survival mode to come out of it the other side and be like, wow, you know what, I'm coming out of this journey a completely different person now, which is so lovely. But I just felt like I'd share that because it was really on topic for what you were saying. But also within that, I had a conversation the other day with some training that I was doing, and I was just saying about if you had to invite money to tea, like what would the experience be like? And before, it would have been a very like weird exchange for me, but actually when I said my point of view, I felt like having an afternoon tea was almost like you pass money, the pot passes it back to you, and it's like this exchange of two ways. So I just thought that also was interesting.
I love that.
Yeah, because it's, for me, obviously the mindset stuff is all of my forte. So it's like almost connecting like what you do with almost with what I do in a strange way, like this interconnection. But yeah, I'd love to kind of know, for you in your life, you know, like with these ups and downs with money, like what was the moment when you kind of decided that you're going to take your power back, you know, your permission moment? What
Yeah, so that I feel like is an ongoing thing that I constantly have to do. And I reached a point, and this was actually not that long ago. So maybe within like 2 years ago. So I've been working with she calls herself a personal power mentor, but I've been on this deep healing journey with my mentor. I've known her since 2016. She actually used to be my yoga instructor here in New York, and then she started her own business during the pandemic. And I've been working with her for about 2.5 years doing this deep healing work. And I knew I needed to do it, but I had so much resistance to the financial commitment. And every time I would make the commitment, I'd be like, oh, like I'm going to do it, but I can't do it. And I shouldn't do it. And my brain would say, like, you can't afford this. Like, you should not be doing this. But then I just knew within my soul, like I needed to do this investment in myself. And I've invested, and I'm still, working with her. And so it's been a continual investment that I've just had to let go of that fear a little at a time, because this investment in myself is the greatest thing that I could be putting my money towards, because this is what comes back to me like in spades, like these are the dividends that pay off, is when I invest in myself like this. And I just had to let go of that fear. And, you work in manifestation, it's trusting, it's like starting to trust the process, and that this is where I'm at today, but I'm not going to be here forever. But this is what I need to get me to where I want to be. And if I'm not mentally able to be there, I'm never going to be able to get there in my life. And so I've had to gradually let go of that fear. And that's like continual. Every time I make a big investment, like last night, I just invested in like a new spiritual like therapist that I'm working with. And that was a little bit of an investment. But this time, like when I gave her my credit card last night, I didn't have that fear. And we even talked about that because she works in manifestation as well. And, she said, "What's your goal?" And I said, "Next year I will be debt free, but I need these things in order to get me there." So 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I would have like sat there and ruminated in the fear. But this is like a continual process of like, even when you stretch yourself, and the more that you stretch yourself and commit to yourself, because committing to yourself is also can bring up a lot of fear too. And so, but it's one of those things where now it's like, I know that I need these things in order to get me to where I'm going. And I just have faith that the things that I'm also investing in are helping me, and they're not the things that I'm trying to fill voids with.
Absolutely.
That's the difference.
100%. And I love everything you said then, because that's kind of the journey that I tried to take my clients on before they sign, is exactly that exchange. Because, I manifestations are byproducts for me of high and deep self-worth. So that's the
Mhm.
end goal in working, my clients work with me, because I do the trauma healing. So it's all about unpacking, you know, the blocks that we've had in our mind, body and soul. And like work, I kind of hold my client's hand and I walk them through that journey. And exactly what you said then about giving yourself that permission and knowing that you're invested in yourself, and that's going to pay you dividends in every single part of your life. Because ultimately, I think we've all got this blueprint of, you know, whatever we've been through in our life, and we've carried that with us, and we get to a point where like, I don't want that for myself anymore. And it seems like you came to that realization and that turning point where you were like, if I keep doing this, I'm going to end up with the same result. So it's like,
Yeah.
I need to invest in myself now in order to have and be the version of myself I know myself to be in the future. And it's really wonderful to see, you know, that on the other side, because this is exactly why, you know, we all want clients to work with us, is for this reason, because the outcome of it is exponential, isn't it? There's no limit to
Yeah.
what can be achieved. And it so is that, because I even thought that with my mentorship, like mine was more for business. And yeah, I feel like I was expecting to see the dividends instantly, but actually it's been a slow process of unveiling each time. And I'm like, every time I do something or something new happens, I'm like, I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't done that. Or,
Yeah.
you know, and it's seeds, isn't it? You plant all of these little seeds and they're all blooming in their own time. And I think that's the beautiful thing about investment and trusting, as you said, you know, having the faith in yourself. And I think that is a massive part of this, isn't it? Like we're saying about this exchange of money, it's that trusting in yourself and putting yourself first as a woman. Like, wow, isn't that such another hot conversation we could have on
Oh,
that?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time. Big time.
Mm,
I also like very much think that the universe supports you when you make those investments, and then
mm,
you show how seriously you're taking the investment in whatever it
absolutely.
is that you're investing in, you know.
I
So I
agree.
think that that always shows the universe just really that you're in it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that was my turning point moment as well. It was like, I've been kind of talking about it. I've been like going around the edges about making this into a business. And then when I invested, I was like, right, I'm telling the universe, this is really it. This is what I'm
Yeah.
doing. And yeah, it's such a wonderful thing, I think, for anyone that's sitting on the fence or, you know, thinking about they know they need to do this thing. It's like, I hope that this podcast acts as a call to action and you're like, yeah, okay, this is the sign. I need to put my money where my mouth is. And as you said, you know, that exchange of you showing the universe that you're taking yourself seriously more than anything,
Hmm.
that's such a declaration of calling in your power and calling your power back to
Yes.
yourself in all of the ways. But I'd love to talk more about, I mean, so much. I mean, like you said, the debt conversation is
Yeah.
such a massive one about why we're embarrassed about debt. And I think, you know, I'm in a situation where I'm single, and I think when I'm looking for someone, I do want them to have a certain degree of you know, financial literacy. And also I
Yep.
don't want them to have mass amount of debt. And I think that's also where this taboo comes in. We're talking about money as well, doesn't it? Because I think for men it's hard because women want men that earn a lot of money and are the breadwinners. But equally, in our own right as women, we do want to have our own money too, and we don't want to be passing our debt on to other people. So there's a lot of shame and blame loop within
Sure.
money. And I guess if someone was in debt at the moment, what would be your advice to kind of manage that emotionally?
Yeah, so I think one is just to explore how you're actually feeling about your debt. So, what I notice is people sweep it under the rug and they're like, this is this thing that I have that I don't want to talk about. I don't want to look at it, but it's there and it kind of like sits behind me, just like haunting me. Right. And that's how people feel about their debt. So, one, it's like, let's come into a relationship with the debt. How are you actually feeling about it? How does it make you feel? And some people are like, oh, I don't care. It's just this thing I have. And I said, okay, but let's make sure that's actually how you're feeling about it. And then when you start digging a little deeper, it's like, yeah, I don't like it. It feels like this burden that I carry. And so it's really identifying and being able to say exactly how you feel about it. And that, like with money across the board, is it's really starting to identify like what are the words that come up like when I say the word debt, like what do people think of? Like what are the first three words? And it's just like that's going to tell you how you feel about your debt. And then how do you want to feel about it? What are your goals for your debt? Because that's always something that with my clients, I don't like to define their goals for them. I need my clients to tell me what their goals are. Some people, their first thing is, I want to be debt free, get me there. Other people, it's like, I want to pay down my debt, but I want to travel and I want to build my emergency savings and I want to do this. And it's like, okay, like those are two different plans right there. You know, those are two different paths forward. And so I always like people to tell me, like, what do you want to do with your debt? And how do we want to tackle this? I don't want to sit there and tell people, like, you need to pay this off and, you know, get this off your balance sheet as quickly as possible, because then I think that that comes from a place of like building in the shame of like, you know, you have this thing, you need to get rid of it. And that completely just goes against what I try to help people, or what I do help people with, and what the tone of the brand is. And so it's one, identifying how you feel about it and how do you want to feel about it. And then what are your goals for your debt? Is, you know, how do you picture your life with your debt? Do you want it, you know, do you want it completely gone, or is it, you know, so that's where it's really personal, like everybody's story and their relationship. And that's kind of one of the things that I love about money and finances is like no two people have the same goals and same situation. And so it's such a personal thing that it's everybody needs to come into a relationship with how they feel about their debt and then what they want it to look like in their financial picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you talk about all of this, Nicole. I could listen to you speak about it all day. I feel like there's a real grounded approach to everything you do. And I think it's so refreshing because I feel like, again, money's either spoken about on a very high tier and we're looking down on everyone, or we're
Right.
speaking it from the ground, looking up, thinking, oh my gosh, how do I get out of this? Whereas I feel like you have such a balance of understanding and a very whole approach to it, which is just really, really refreshing, as I said, because I think it all takes into account. And my mentor always says that our bank account is a reflection of the way we feel about
Yes.
ourselves, which I do agree with, but I also don't agree with as well. Like I feel like there's a polarity to that, because I think sometimes we know that we are worthy of more,
Mhm.
and maybe we haven't quite got there yet, you know. So I think some people can
Yeah.
feel shame even from that statement, even though I do believe in it. I think it's definitely a sign of your self-worth. But like you said, if you're in a position where you've just invested into something, or you wanted to clear some debt or whatever, you have debt in your name, but the debt bought you a house, or, you know, bought you something you needed, I feel like it shouldn't just be the number of the bank account that defines you.
No.
It's your whole approach to it. And I think the way you look at it is very that, you know, it's like a whole human being rather than just how good your arms work, you know, which is like, that's what I
Yeah.
think from your approach there, which I love. And I wonder, I mean, for me, this just screams out that it needs to be in schools. Is that something
Oh,
they teach
yeah.
in America, or is it not taught?
Not really, but there is a huge push. I mean, there needs to be more of a push, I
Mm,
think, at the high school level as people go into adulthood, and then also at the college level as people are now leaving. This is like, you know, when people leave college, that's really like when you enter into adulthood. You're no longer a student anymore. Like you
yeah.
go into the job market. This is where people can start making money. Like I think at both levels, there really needs to be financial literacy. And I think it needs to be continued all the way through adulthood, because our financial situation changes, and you could have, you know, a great financially secure job, and then that can get taken away from you and the rug
Mm.
can get ripped out from under you. And so I think that it's continual, and that people need to have that support and those resources as they continue through life. And just on the last thing that you said about the bank account, so what I always like to tell people is your spending will tell you where you know, where you're spending your money will tell you how about your financial situation. And also like looking at the bank account, like that's where I like to look at wealth. Like people think wealth like big bank account or fancy cars. Hmm. But wealth is way beyond money. And I always want to teach people that wealth isn't just about having a lot of money. Wealth is about time and health and friendships and being able to have the resources to invest in those things. So it's not just about a bank account balance, because I did a post about this where it's like, let's say somebody makes $500,000, but they work 80 to 100 hours a week and they don't have time to do hobbies or invest in their mental health or their relationships. And maybe, but they have a padded bank account, but then you have somebody who makes significantly less money, but lives comfortably, has time to do the things that they want, has time to invest in friendships and relationships. Like, who's the wealthier person?
I love that so much. And I think Bob Marley did an interview about that, and someone asked him, are you rich? And he said, my rich and your rich are very different things. He says, I have a very rich life, but it's not the rich that you know. And it
Yeah.
is so that, isn't it? And I love that you bring that up, because I think it's so important. Like you said, you can have all the like actual tangible money in the world, but if you don't have the time to spend it, or
Yep.
people to spend it with, that's so it, isn't it? And that's such a beautiful way to look at wealth as a whole, because I think for some people maybe listening that their bank account isn't where it wants, they're not where it wants it to be. I think it's that understanding that, are you able to eat decent meals, the
Yep.
meals that you enjoy? Are you having those meals with people you love? And even if you're not going out to dinner, it's like, are you able to cook for your friends and family? Are you able to go and get that little coffee and sit in the coffee shop once a week to yourself, pay for your classes that you like to do, or send your children to the classes they like
Right.
to do? That's very wealthy. And I think we get so caught up these days, especially with social media, don't we, about how, like you said, about this perfect world and ideal. And it's like, actually, these people that are posting, their brand new Chanel bags every week, are they really
Right.
truly happy? I mean, maybe, but maybe not,
Right.
right?
Right. Exactly. And that's just where, and wealth is also a personal thing. Everybody gets to decide what wealth means to them.
Mm,
I don't like to generalize it, because maybe some people, they want to have more time. It's just really, and I always challenge people is to really think about, what does wealth mean to you and what does a wealthy life mean to you? Like, if I like paint a picture of like your wealthiest life, like what does that look like? And everybody gets to paint that picture for themselves, and it's not necessarily always going to be yachts and San Tropez, right? That's not
mm.
always going to be the picture that people paint. People want to have, family and time with relationships and friends, and to do the things that they love. And so I just always challenge people, because I don't think that we ever really think about, like, what does wealth actually mean to me?
Yeah, so spot on. I think with doing this kind of work now, I think especially mindset and stuff, I think I've always, since I started that journey of my own healing, I think I always got quite clear on what I wanted my life to look like. And every step of the way, it's that element of freedom, like what you're talking about there. I think to be able to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, is such an important thing. And that comes with obviously building financial support. But for me, fundamentally, I'm a service-based business, so I want to be helping people as well. So I think yeah, it's such a great question to ask, anyone. That's a great thing. If you're driving right now, don't do it, but when you get home, write down, what does wealth actually mean to you?
Yeah.
Because then I guess this probably goes into the next bit. What I was going to ask you is, how can we start to get more financially literate? Like, what are some top tips that you have for us that we can do starting right now to kind of help us get better at it?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing that I always tell people, the first step is always having awareness and actually starting to pay attention to how you feel around your money and your triggers, because people can have money triggers and not even realize them, especially if you've had them your whole entire life. So the first thing, and this is part of the reason why I called my podcast the Money Diaries, is I like to tell people, like, keep a diary of how you feel about your money and start like writing about it and say, I did this thing today and it actually brought me a lot of joy and I was able to accept it and bring it in. And then maybe there's something else that it's like, I had to make this payment and I didn't feel good about it and it made me anxious. And so it's like starting to identify and having awareness around how you feel about your money. And then also, I know it can be very anxiety producing for people to check their bank accounts or their investment accounts. And so that's always starting to break down that fear is just going to be by doing that consistently. And so I always tell people, like, start to have a relationship with your money. And this is something that I talk about, like financial health on the next episode of my podcast is financial health. Like when we think about health, we never factor in financial health. Like we always talk about physical health and mental health, but our financial health affects those things. And so it's like starting to come into a relationship with your financial health and give it the time and attention. Like if you go to the gym or do yoga, for your physical health, and you go to therapy and meditate or whatever you do for your mental health, like what are you doing for your financial health? And so that can be starting to check your bank accounts and being familiar with your money and seeing where it's going. So tracking your spending is so crucial. And that's building that relationship with your money, because a lot of people, it's like money in and then money goes out. And I don't know what happens in between. But I have money left over at the end of the month, and some people don't have money left over at the end of the month, but like, where is it going? What is it doing? And so it's really building that relationship with your money. It's so important because I think people don't realize how emotional it is. And so when you start to build that relationship, you start to have a healthier emotional relationship with your money. And then once you start to do that, start thinking about what you want your money to be doing for you. Where should it be going? What's the direction? If you're not tracking your spending or making any goals, then your money's just kind of going all over the place, And so when you give your money, when you start defining goals, little goals, like start with something small, and make big ones that seem ridiculous too, and everything in between. But when you put pen to paper and you write those goals out, I truly believe that you give them life. And then that's where you start directing your money that way. And I know for myself that when I have a goal, I start thinking about my money differently, because it's like, do I really need this thing? Do I really need to do that? Or do I want to keep my goal in mind and get one step closer to my goal? And that's how I reach my goals, is because that's the mental part that we start to shift our habits and behaviors. And it's really difficult because people cannot in the beginning, because people cannot be used to doing that and to just kind of spending here and there and doing whatever they want. But when you start to make those shifts, that's really where you just have so many big shifts that start happening once you get that momentum. And so those are really the places that I like to tell people to start.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so spot on. And I think that's some of the things you've listed there are things I've had to do myself. So I completely resonate with everything. And, journaling's a massive part of the work that I teach. I have a journal that I've created myself. So I 100%, I'm on it. And I actually, when you were talking, I was thinking, you're going to write a book one day. You're going to write a how-to book one day for sure. Like everything you were saying, I was like, yes, I need to read this. Like, absolutely. Because it really reminds me of Rich Dad Poor Dad, like the way you're talking about this, but from a very understanding, like I said, grounded, everyone can do it approach, which is so what we need in the world right now. And another thing, I was getting like this visual representation of like almost like money being like a dam, like lots of water in this area. And it's almost like you have to create little streams for the water to go down in order for it to build and fill up somewhere else. So it's almost like pouring it into somewhere so it has somewhere to travel. Otherwise the dam just gets so overflowing that it either breaks and you end up spending it on something you don't want, right, or you have a mass amount of savings and then, like you said, you get too scared to spend it. So it's like almost like if you create these little almost like funnels where it can go. And I think about times in my life where I've worked really, really hard for something, but knowing that I was going to travel, or I was going to go and do a really amazing holiday, like these things that I've mentally prepared for, out of nowhere I just found the money. I picked up the work, I did the thing. And I feel like I've always had quite a easy approach to money as I got older, because I just felt like I'll work harder and make more. But now the shift for me has been, I don't need to work harder, the money will come. And I think that's a different level, isn't it, of mindset work that is probably not everyone's going to go to that approach, because obviously I'm now like soul spirit led and all this stuff. But you know, from a
Yeah.
very grounded approach, I think giving yourself that clear guideline, you know, writing these things down so you can see in front of yourself, like maybe you feel like you have a good relationship with money, but actually writing down how anxious you felt about checking your account or
Right.
you know, paying that bill will give you that real clarity to see that actually there is something there. Like I remember when I very first did The Secret, and it says about writing down on the bills that you get through, like writing down paid with thanks or something like that on the top. And I started doing that. And like now, every time something comes through the post, instead of me thinking it's going to be a bill, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a check. And one day it was a check. And I was like,
Yeah.
yo, this is
It
the thing about
works. Look at
mindset,
that.
right? Yeah. If you have that
Yes.
idea, it will absolutely be that. And I think we just don't realize how much power we hold.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, you know, you're saying all of this, it makes it so clear. And also something really important that you said, you've mentioned it a few times, and I keep forgetting to say, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to remember it this time. It's the 1% difference, isn't it? You know, the small steps that we repeat daily takes our trajectory from being even to actually growing. I think it's that, just that small little thing. And what happens with your comfort zone is it's just a safe space and nothing grows in it. So it's almost like you have to test yourself every single day to push one step further, like the stretching that you were talking about. And then when you realize, all of a sudden, it's like if you wanted to do the splits, for example, if you stretched every single day for a year, you would 1000% be in the splits. It's inevitable. And that's just like being comfortable with money or receiving money. It's all of that. And the great thing about that stretching is knowing that if what the worst case scenario happened and you did lose it all, because you know how you got it, you can make it back. And I think that's also power in that knowing, isn't it? That knowing that you can make it back. And also, as well, a massive, huge part of this, which I feel like we've loosely covered, is that the money doesn't define you.
No.
It
Yeah.
doesn't make you a better person if you have more money in your account.
No, not at all. And that's just where I think there's a perception that that is the case, and that, you know, more money will solve all my problems, you
But
know, and that's just not the case, you know, and then I'll have a healthy relationship with my spending, and I won't be overspending, and then I won't have fear at night. And then I can tell you firsthand, because of the clients that I work with through my job, that is not the case.
And I think also on the other side of that, I think if you've never had large scale amounts of money, that sometimes there's quite a malicious look at people that do have financial wealth.
Yes.
And I think that also needs to be looked at and addressed, because I feel like maybe to some extent I was that person at some point away, but now I look at it in a very different way. And I'm like, everyone is just human, and their life is their life. The way that they've chosen to live is their choice. I don't feel like someone's better or worse for having that money. And you know, now if I see someone on holiday on a yacht, I'm like, yes, queen, slay. Whereas a part of me before would have been like, oh, look at them on a yacht.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Now I'm like, yes, you better take 500 photos and post them, and I want to see them all. Do you know what I mean? So it's about healing that, because there's a part of us that's envious or jealous of that. And I think that's also something that needs to be looked at, and you'll obviously find that when you start writing about it.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the emotional and energetic relationship that we have with our money. So when we have those reactions, that's exactly what we should be journaling about. Is I saw someone's Instagram post, or I went to dinner with a friend and she had this, or she was talking about this trip that she's taking. That reaction that you have, good or bad, if you react and then you immediately feel tightness and tense and judgment, write about that, explore that, like really dig deep on it. It's like, why did I have this reaction to what this person has? Or maybe, like you said, now you've gotten to a place where you're like, yeah, look at you. I bet you worked really hard for that trip, or for that whatever it is that you have. And it's like, celebrate that as well and say, you know what, like a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to be here, but now look at this shift that I'm having, you know? And now it's like, because that's the exact mindset that drives our relationship with our money. Those sneaky things like that, that's what drives our relationship with our money.
Absolutely that. And I think as well, you know, being in the room with people that have different levels of wealth than you is just a great experience. You know, I think since I entered the entrepreneurial space, I'm in rooms with like women that earn 7, 8 figures. And I think
Mhm.
before, when I was younger, I would have looked at those women from an outside perspective and thought, oh, well, it's all right for them because, or, you know, oh, they're lucky because, but actually standing in the room with these women, it's like, I have the utmost respect for them, but they
Yep.
are normal women. They're
Yes.
humans. And I think that made it so much more believable and achievable for me when I saw that. Do you know what I mean? And
Right.
you know, maybe being an 8-figure business owner isn't in my reality, but I can see that it's possible and I can
Right.
feel the energetic space of it. And now I
Yeah.
feel very different about money, because if one day I do become an 8-figure business owner, it will be because my vibrational match was there, but also
Yes.
because I've stayed in integrity to who I am, and the universe wants me to have that space. Not because that's
100%.
my driving force. It's because I'm a match to that energy. And I think that's a nice space to be in.
It's a beautiful space to be in. I mean, and that's a powerful space to be in.
Yeah, it's taken a long time to get to here, but I
Yeah.
think, you know, that growth journey, I think it's nice to be able to reflect on that. And I didn't realize how much I'd worked my money mindset until this last week. So it's been quite nice actually to have you on this week, because I did another call with a company that I work with. I give them my support and advice, and they had someone in delivering money mindset workshops, and I was just kind of back and forth with feedback, and then some of my answers everyone was really intrigued about, and then the coach was like, yeah, well, you clearly have worked on your money mindset. I was like, you know what, I really have. I've been doing it,
Yeah.
been doing the work, and that's what's really important about me doing everything I do, is because I'm not just telling someone to do something. It's I'm doing it with you. I'm not just saying it. I'm here. I'm writing down every night. You know, I'm doing things.
Yeah. And that's really important because I think that that's what people connect to is
Mm,
when they know that you know what it feels like, to do the work. And then it's also motivating and inspiring for other people who want to be in the mindset that you have. And that's just exactly what I know part of the reason why I started my brand is just to give people that support and to make it approachable and people to feel safe
mm,
to ask questions and feel vulnerable with their money and their money mindset because I know that there's not a lot of space for that within the financial industry and sometimes even like within the personal finance coaching industry. But it's really, you just want people to feel safe enough to where that they can be vulnerable and really open up and trust you, and that just comes
absolutely.
from exactly what you said.
No, 100%. And I think that's so important. The word safety. I think
Mhm.
that a lot, that probably is a word that people tie to money, don't they? A lot.
Oh yeah.
So I think if you can give people that, that's already it. And I can hear just from you as a person that that's who you are, you know. I was going to ask you actually through this what your star sign is.
I'm a Capricorn.
Oh yeah, I thought that. I thought you're either a Virgo or a Capricorn. I have a Capricorn moon, so all of what you're talking about with the strategic way and processing, the grounded approach, that's all like how my mind works. So that's why
Mhm.
I think I was resonating so deeply with you. And then as you were going on, I was like, yeah, you're definitely an Earth sign. There's so much
Yeah.
groundedness to this, which is why you're so great at what you do, because you have this very level-headed approach to it instead of being, I don't know, like wishy-washy, like water, or, you know, like fiery and like over the top with it. You know, you're very, very grounded with it, which I think is incredible. But I've loved talking to you about this, and I feel like there's so much more I could ask. But I think what we'll do is we'll signpost everyone over to your podcast, because this is all you speak about. So I think it's a great one to for people to listen to. So yeah, tell us about your podcast and also like the offers that you have, how people can find you and possibly work with you.
Sure. Yeah, so the podcast is called The Money Diaries. It's on Apple and Spotify, and I just got it launched within the past couple weeks. And so they will have weekly episodes. And so the reason I called it The Money Diaries is because I really want to have like deep, intimate conversations around money and all the sides of money that we never talk about. And so, just like the conversation that we're having today, there'll be topics like that. And then you can find me on Instagram and TikTok My brand is Wall Street Girl Next Door, where I post content and just tips, and I just really try to help people look at their relationship with their money and how they're thinking and feeling about their money. And I do one-on-one coaching right now, and then I will be having a course launch hopefully soon on all looking at our money story and how we grew up thinking about money and money mindset and financial health, hopefully coming out soon. So definitely find me on social media to stay up to date with everything that's coming out through the brand.
Yes, and hopefully one day you'll have a self-help book too, because I
Oh,
can
that's
see it for
yes.
you. I can
That
see
is
it now.
definitely on the agenda.
Yeah, I can see it. I can just, as you were speaking, it was coming to the forefront of my mind, and I was like, this woman's going to
Yeah.
write a book, and it's gonna change people's lives for sure, which I
Oh, thank
love.
you. Thank
So
you.
no, I think you're incredible, and I love that I was able to see that even just through the posts that I found on social media of you. I was just like, yeah, this woman's got it, and it's just really nice that to see and feel how real you are in what you're doing, because as I said, sometimes on socials we get lost, or the world is so vast and there's so much people doing a lot of things, there's a lot of noise. But I think the
Yes.
fact that I'm such a real person and I draw in real people, for me, is such a lovely thing. So thank you for being here. And to kind of round off the podcast, I always have like a soul to soul segment. Now, this could be something you would say to your younger self, or maybe someone that's listening in a difficult position right now, but just off the top of your head, like from in your heart, like what do you feel like you would like to share?
So one thing I would say is just start believing in yourself. Start believing that you're meant for good things, and start believing that you're meant to have peace around your money. And if you have any fear or shame, just start believing that you're meant to have peace and happiness and enjoyment with your money.
Yes, absolutely. That peace is the word. That was my word for this year, was peace. And I feel like in a weird way I've kind of found it, but it's an ever-going process, isn't it? Ebbing and
It
flowing
is.
always. But thank
Yes.
you so much, Nicole. I think that you are going to change the world some way or another. I think you're going to have a really big impact. And yeah, I can't wait to, keep following your journey. And I'm going to pop all of your details in the show notes so everyone can find you on there. But thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it was just such a pleasure to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you.